June 1941. The air smelled of summer, dry grass, dust, and sunlight, when the war arrived. We heard the news on the radio. The Germans had crossed the border. By noon, the first planes were already above us. I was in the field, helping my father cut hay. When the sirens began to wail, we looked up and saw black crosses glinting in the sky. A moment later, the station to the west vanished in a flash of fire. The sound was unlike anything I'd ever heard, a wall of thunder that shook the ground beneath my feet. By evening, I was a soldier. They loaded us into trucks and handed out rifles that smelled of oil and rust. My mother gave me a piece of bread wrapped in cloth. My father said nothing. He just placed his hand on my shoulder, a heavy silence that said everything. At the training ground, men from every corner of the country stood together. Farmers, teachers, boys barely old enough to shave. Our commander, Captain Volkov, told us, "Comrades, this is not a short war. You will suffer. You will lose. But you must never surrender. The motherland will endure through you." We believed him, because believing was easier than thinking. A few days later, we were sent west. The roads were chaos. Refugees, burning carts, children crying. Smoke rose in every direction. At night, the horizon glowed red. When we reached the front, the first battle was already over. What remained were twisted tanks, dead horses, and silence. I remember the smell most of all: iron, smoke, and something sweet and rotten that clung to your clothes. Our orders were simple: hold the line. But the line was nothing. Shallow trenches, barely any ammunition. The Germans came with tanks and planes. Their artillery struck before dawn. The earth erupted around us, dirt and fire flying through the air. I remember falling flat, my face in the mud, heart hammering. Someone screamed for a medic. Someone else screamed for his mother. When the shelling stopped, the ground was littered with bodies. We fired when they appeared, gray uniforms moving through the smoke. I don't remember aiming. I just pulled the trigger again and again until my rifle clicked empty. When it was over, the field was quiet, except for the crackling of fires. I saw a German soldier lying nearby, no older than me. His helmet had rolled off, his eyes staring at the sky. That was the moment I understood. This wasn't glory. It was survival. We retreated that night through the forest, exhausted and hungry. The moonlight made the trees look like ghosts. Volkov led us in silence. When one man stumbled and said he couldn't go on, Volkov lifted him up and said, "You'll rest when we reach Moscow." Not before. We never reached Moscow. Not then. Days blurred together, marching, digging, shooting, running. The Germans advanced like a machine, unstoppable and precise. We were the mud in their gears, slowing them 1 inch at a time. By September, we were half our original number. Our boots were torn, our stomachs empty, but still we fought, because to stop was to die. Once, during a lull between battles, Volkov handed me his canteen. "You're young, Morozov," he said quietly. "You'll see things no man should. Remember them. One day, someone must tell what happened here." I nodded, though I didn't understand. I was too tired to. When winter came, the cold was another enemy. Frost covered our rifles. Water froze in our canteens. Some men wrapped newspapers around their feet because we had no proper boots left. But something changed then. The Germans began to slow. Their engines froze, their breath turned white in the air. For the first time, we saw them hesitate. And that was when we struck back. In the snow outside Moscow, we attacked at dawn. The ground shook beneath our boots, and our rifles cracked like whips. We shouted until our throats bled, driving them backward through the frozen fields. The sky was gray, the wind sharp, and every heartbeat felt like fire. When the battle ended, the snow was red, and the city still stood. Moscow had not fallen. That night, huddled around a small fire, Volkov said, "We've stopped them, at least for now. Remember this day, comrades, the day the Earth fought back." No one spoke after that. We just sat there, listening to the wind howl through the ruins, watching the snow cover the bodies, ours and theirs alike. I wrote one line in my notebook before I slept. The world burns, but we are still here. From the notes of Sergeant Ivan Morozov, 86th Rifle Division. Winter never really ended after Moscow. It just sank deeper into our bones. The snow swallowed everything, roads, villages, even the dead. We built our shelters from frozen logs and rags, sleeping beside dying fires. Our boots cracked, our breath turned to frost. The wind howled across the steppe like a living thing, cold enough to burn skin. We were told the front had stabilized, that the Germans were stopped. But stopped didn't mean peace. It meant dying slower. Our days blurred together, digging trenches, melting snow for water, counting bullets. We fought not just the enemy, but hunger, lice, and the endless cold. Sometimes, I wondered which would kill us first. I remember one morning when a supply truck finally reached us. Inside were a few sacks of flour, some tins of meat, and a radio that barely worked. We gathered around as static filled the air. Then a voice broke through, announcing a new offensive near the Volga. Stalingrad. The word carried weight even then. It sounded like a promise, or a grave. We didn't know it yet, but half of us would never leave that place. That night around the fire, Corporal Petrov joked, "If I die in Stalingrad, at least I'll die warm." No one laughed. Captain Volkov looked at us, his face lit by the flames. "Comrades, remember, cold cannot kill courage. Hunger cannot kill duty. We hold until the motherland breathes again." He always spoke like that, not loud, not dramatic, but steady. It kept us moving when nothing else could. We reached the outskirts of Stalingrad in late summer 1942. The city was already half ruined, buildings torn open, streets full of rubble. The air smelled of smoke, brick dust, and fear. Everywhere there was noise, gunfire, collapsing walls, planes screaming overhead. The Germans bombed without mercy, turning the city into a skeleton. Our orders were simple, not one step back. We fought from building to building, room to room. Sometimes the enemy was just a wall away. We could hear them breathing, talking, cursing. At night, we crawled through cellars filled with bodies, looking for food or ammunition. We learned to fight like ghosts, silently, quickly, in the dark. The city became a maze of shadows and fire. One day Petrov was hit by shrapnel near the river. I dragged him behind a pile of bricks, his blood freezing on my hands. He looked up at me and whispered, "Don't let them take this place, Vanya." Then he was gone. I buried him in the snow and marked the spot with his rifle. That night, Volkov sat beside me. He didn't speak for a long time. Then he said quietly, "When this ends, we will remember every name. But for now, we fight for the living." Those words stayed with me. The battle dragged on through the autumn. We ate whatever we found, rats, frozen bread, anything that would burn in our stomachs. Men collapsed from exhaustion. Still, no one surrendered. When the German winter came, it was their turn to starve. We could see them across the ruins, pale faces, frostbitten hands, eyes hollow with disbelief. The invincible army of Europe trapped and dying in the snow. By February 1943, it was over. Their commander surrendered. The city was ours. What was left of it? We walked through the ruins in silence. No cheers, no celebration, just the crunch of boots on frozen ashes. I remember seeing a child's doll half buried in the rubble, its face burned black. For some reason, that broke me more than anything else. Volkov said, "This is victory, comrades. But remember, Even victory costs blood, I wrote that line in my notebook. Later, when I read it again, I realized he was wrong. It didn't cost blood. It cost souls. When we left Stalingrad, the snow began to melt. Rivers of mud flowed through the ruins, carrying the ashes of what had been a city. Crows circled overhead. The sun felt strange on my face, like something forgotten. We were heroes, they said, but all I felt was tired. We had won the greatest battle of the war, and yet, for those of us who survived, it felt like we had lost something far greater, the part of ourselves that once believed in miracles. That spring, as we moved west toward new battles, Volkov told me, "The war is turning, Ivan. The tide is ours now." I wanted to believe him, but I'd seen too much to trust in tides. I just nodded, closed my eyes, and tried not to remember the faces I'd left in the snow. From the diary of Sergeant Ivan Morozov, 86th Rifle Division. After Stalingrad, the wind began to change. The Germans were retreating, slowly, painfully, like a wounded beast that refused to die. For the first time, our maps showed arrows pointing west, not east. We marched through lands that had been occupied for 2 years, villages burned to the ground, fields covered in bones. Everywhere we went, people came out of hiding, thin as shadows, eyes hollow but alive. They touched our uniforms and whispered, "You came back." Some kissed our hands, some just wept. It was strange. We were called liberators, but we felt more like ghosts. The Red Army had changed. We were harder now, colder. New recruits joined us, boys who had never fired a gun, old men with shaking hands. They looked to us, the Stalingrad survivors, as if we were legends, but legends don't bleed. We did. Captain Volkov had been promoted, but he still fought beside us. He carried a small notebook, always writing after each battle. Once I asked what he was recording. He said, "Names. So they are not forgotten." In March, we fought near Kursk. Rumors said the Germans were preparing their last great offensive. We dug trenches for days, waiting for the storm. When it came, it was like the earth itself had decided to explode. Tanks, hundreds of them, rolled across the horizon. The air filled with smoke and fire. Our artillery answered, a wall of thunder that shook our teeth. For hours, the world was nothing but noise and light. Men ran, screamed, disappeared. I fired until my rifle was too hot to hold. Somewhere in the chaos, Volkov's command post was hit. When I found him, he was lying beneath a collapsed beam, his notebook beside him, pages soaked in blood. He was still alive, barely. He grabbed my sleeve and whispered, "Keep it safe, Ivan. Promise me I did." And then he was gone. I carried that notebook through every battle after that. It became heavier with each page, as if the dead themselves were holding it down. The Battle of Kursk was victory, they said. We had broken the enemy once more. But looking around at the burning tanks, at the bodies of friends and foes alike, it was hard to feel triumphant. Still, something inside us shifted. We began to believe, not in glory, but in survival. For the first time, we could see the end of the war in the distance, faint and flickering like a star through smoke. We pushed forward through the summer. The air was thick with the smell of wet soil and cordite. Villages rose and fell in a rhythm that never seemed to stop. We fought in fields, in forests, in places whose names no one would remember. Once, during a brief lull, I met a nurse named Anya at a field hospital. She was young, her face pale under the dim lantern light. She asked where I had come from. "Stalingrad," I said. She went silent for a moment, then said softly, "You must have seen hell." I nodded. "And you?" She smiled sadly. "I work here." Hell comes to me I never saw her again, but I remembered her words every time I passed a stretcher. By autumn, the war felt endless again. We were advancing, yes, but at a terrible cost. Every village took a dozen lives, every hill 100. The ground was soaked with blood, but we kept moving forward. Sometimes at night, I opened Volkov's notebook and read the names aloud. It felt like a prayer. The others would listen in silence, the fire crackling, snow beginning to fall again. We no longer spoke of politics or glory. We spoke of home, of mothers, wives, the smell of bread, small things that made us remember why we were still alive. In November, we crossed the Dnieper River under artillery fire. The sky was red, the water black. Half our boats sank before reaching the other side. But when the sun rose, the flag of the Soviet Union flew on the western bank. We had done it. We had crossed into lands once thought lost forever. That night, our commander gathered us and said, "Comrades, the tide has turned. The fascists are retreating. But do not forget, a cornered beast is still deadly." He was right. The next morning, a German counterattack hit us hard. We fought for every meter of frozen ground. When it was over, I looked around and realized there were fewer of us again. Always fewer. I sat in the mud and opened Volkov's notebook. I added 3 more names. Then I closed it and whispered to the wind, "The tide may turn, but the sea still takes everything." As winter approached once more, we dug in near Kiev. The city was in ruins, but free. Civilians came out with bread, salt, and tears. For the first time in years, I saw laughter, fragile, trembling laughter. And for a brief moment, it felt like hope. That night, as I watched the snow begin to fall again, I thought of Petrov, of Volkov, of the countless faces that would never see this day. The war was not over, but for the first time, it felt like it might be survivable. By 1944, the map was bleeding west. Each week, the front lines moved a little closer to Germany. We no longer fought to survive. We fought to finish. The motherland was behind us now, scarred but breathing. Ahead lay the lands that had once been under the enemy's heel, Belarus, Poland, and beyond. Every kilometer we marched, the ruins told the same story. Ash, bones, silence. I had stopped counting the dead. There were too many graves and not enough names. The men no longer spoke of victory. We spoke of endings, of what would be left when the killing stopped. Our uniforms were torn, our eyes hollow, our faces lined with years we hadn't lived yet. But we moved forward, like the tide that could not retreat. In the summer of 1944, we launched Operation Bagration, a storm of steel and fire that tore through the German lines. It was said to be revenge for everything that had come before, Minsk, Smolensk, the millions lost. But revenge has no warmth. When the smoke cleared, the only thing left was more silence. Villages appeared like ghosts out of the mist, people emerging from cellars, clutching bread, whispering prayers. They looked at us with a mix of gratitude and fear. To them, soldiers meant both liberation and death. One night, I met an old man outside a ruined church. He offered me a small wooden cross and said, "You've driven out the devil. Now pray you do not become him. I still carry that cross." In Poland, we saw what the Germans had truly done. The camps. I will not write what I saw there. Some things cannot be spoken aloud. But after that, none of us needed speeches or orders. We knew why we had to keep going. The closer we came to Germany, the harder the fighting grew. The enemy was desperate now. Every village became a fortress, every river a wall of fire. We lost hundreds each day, sometimes just to take a single street. Once, near the Vistula, I found a photo on a dead German soldier, a wife, 2 children. They looked so ordinary. I kept staring at it. wondering if he had been kind, if he had ever imagined his world would end in this mud. For the first time, I felt pity. Maybe war kills that part of you last, the part that can still feel pity. By January 1945, we crossed into Germany itself. It felt unreal. For years, they had come to us, burning, killing, destroying. Now, we were the ones marching through their land. The villages were quiet, empty, except for the smoke of distant fires. Civilians watched us from their windows, silent and afraid. I could see in their faces the same fear we had felt years ago. One of the men in my unit, Sasha, said, "Let them taste it. Let them know what they did to us." Another replied softly, "Then we're no different." The war had twisted us all, some into steel, others into ghosts. We reached the Oder River in March. Berlin lay just beyond. The air itself felt heavy, filled with the weight of history. Artillery thundered day and night. Planes crossed the sky like flocks of black birds. We dug in along the riverbank, waiting for the final push. That night, I took out Volkov's notebook again. It was nearly full now, the pages stained and frayed. I wrote a single line. "The end is near, and I do not know if I am ready for peace." When the order came to advance, it felt like the world was holding its breath. The crossing was chaos, smoke, fire, screams. Men fell into the water, the current pulling them away. I don't know how I made it across. Only that when I did, I looked back and saw the river burning. The road to Berlin was paved with bodies. Tanks rolled past shattered houses. Children hid in basements. The city was a graveyard before we even entered it. Inside the capital, every street was a battlefield. Snipers on rooftops, artillery echoing between the ruins, flames lighting the night like a second sun. We fought block by block, inch by inch. I remember seeing the Reichstag in the distance, black smoke rising behind it. Someone shouted, "It's almost over!" But it didn't feel that way. It felt like the world itself was breaking apart. On May 2nd, the guns finally went silent. The German army surrendered. The war, at least this war, was over. We stood in the ruins of Berlin, too tired to cheer. Rain began to fall, washing the dust from our faces. For the first time in years, the sound of artillery was replaced by silence. A silence so deep, it felt like it could swallow you whole. Sasha lit a cigarette and said, "So, this is victory." No one answered. I walked through the empty streets, past craters and burned-out tanks. A piano was lying in the rubble, its keys shattered, but one note still rang when the wind touched it. A single broken sound, the last echo of everything we had lost. I sat down and opened Volkov's notebook for the final time. There was no room left for names, so I wrote instead, "We have reached the end of the road, but I do not know if there is a way home." Then I closed it, and for the first time, final entry from the diary of Sergeant Ivan Morozov, 86th Rifle Division. The war ended in May, but peace did not come with it. It was strange. After years of noise, the silence felt unbearable. No gunfire, no orders, no screams. Only the sound of wind through broken windows and the faint hum of distant trains. We stayed in Germany for months after the surrender. Our job was to keep order, to bury the dead, to count what was left. But how do you count ghosts? Berlin was a shell, a city of ashes. People wandered through the ruins like shadows, searching for names, for faces, for something to hold on to. Sometimes I wondered if they were any different from us. At night, we sat around small fires, the flames flickering against the shattered walls. No one spoke much. When someone laughed, it sounded foreign, fragile, like something we had forgotten how to do. One evening, I took out Volkov's notebook again. It was torn, the pages full, the cover soaked from the rain. For a long time, I just stared at it. Then I began to read the names, one by one. Petrov, Volkov, Sasha, hundreds more. When I finished, I closed it and whispered, "We made it, comrades. The war is over. You can rest now." But the truth was, none of us could. When our unit was finally sent home, the journey felt unreal. We rode in open trucks through endless fields, past rivers and forests we had crossed years ago under fire. Now they were green again, alive. And yet, to us, they felt like graves. When I reached my village, my mother was there, standing in the doorway. Her hair had gone gray. She didn't cry when she saw me. She just touched my face and said, "You came back." I wanted to tell her that the boy who left hadn't come back, that he was still somewhere out there, in the snow, in the mud, in the smoke of Stalingrad. But I just nodded and said, "Yes, Mama. I'm home." At night, I couldn't sleep. The silence of the countryside was too deep. Every sound, the wind, the creak of wood, felt like an echo of the past. Sometimes I woke up shouting, still hearing artillery in my dreams. People in the village wanted stories. They wanted to hear about victory, about Berlin, about glory. But I didn't know how to tell them that war isn't made of stories. It's made of faces you'll never see again. I helped rebuild the fields that summer. The soil was rich, dark, full of life, and full of bones. When my shovel hit something hard, I dug carefully. It was a rusted helmet. I placed it under a tree and whispered a small prayer. The years began to blur, just like the battles once had. We were all older now, even the young ones. Some married, some drank, some disappeared into the silence. For me, the war never truly ended. It just changed shape, from bullets and fire to memories and ghosts. One day I visited the train station where it had all begun in 1941. There was a new sign, new paint, children running with laughter. I sat on a bench and watched them. Their voices were bright, untouched. A young boy ran up and asked, "Were you in the war?" I hesitated, then nodded. He looked at me with wide eyes and said, "Did we win?" I smiled, not because I felt joy, but because I wanted him to have it. "Yes," I said, "we won." But as he ran off, I whispered to myself, "We won, but the cost was everything." In the evenings, I sometimes walk to the edge of the fields where the forest begins. The air there is quiet, the sky endless. I take out Volkov's notebook, now bound with string to keep it from falling apart. The pages are yellow, the ink fading, but every name is still there, every face, every life that ended so mine could continue. I read them slowly, letting the wind carry each name away. When I finish, I close the notebook and place it on the ground beneath a birch tree. Then I say the same words Volkov once said to me. Remember them. One day someone must tell what happened here. Maybe that's all I can do now. Remember. Sometimes when the sun sets and the light turns red over the fields, I swear I can see them. Petrov laughing, Volkov writing, Sasha smoking by the fire. For a heartbeat, they're all there again, young, alive, unbroken, and then the wind takes them away. I don't fear that anymore, because I know they're not gone. They live in the earth, in the rivers, in the air we breathe. They live in the stories we tell, in the silence that follows, in the world that somehow survived us. The war ended years ago, but its shadow remains, and maybe that's how it should be, not as a wound, but as a reminder. Before I close this diary for the last time, I write one final line. The world burns, heals, and burns again. But as long as someone remembers, we never truly die. Then I lay down my pen. Outside, the wind carries the smell of rain across the fields. And somewhere, far away, thunder rumbles, soft, distant, almost gentle. It sounds like peace.